So we'll get started, and I'm sure we're going to have folks join us as we go. But I'll just start with a brief introduction. So today's call was really, geared towards our principals and school leaders, and thinking about how we can both care for educators and yourselves during this time, and empower everyone and give everyone the flexibility that they need to really serve our students during this time. So that's really going to be the topic for today. We're going to start with that topic of self-care. But I wanted to start while folks continue to join over the next 4 or 5 minutes. If folks who are on the call, feel free to unmute yourself. Can just share something that they're proud of that their school is doing right now to serve students during this.
So Lorna Dill from Creative Minds International Public Charter School. We are having so much success disseminating our devices so that our students, whether they have access to computers at home or not, maybe there's multiple children and they need devices. And so we have had several device handouts, and it's a success.
Great, thank you. Any of the other, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is Claire Berkey-Banneker. I would say our staff was really behind in terms of knowing anything about how to use any sort of platform. Very few of us knew how, so I think we've come a long way in 2 weeks and are starting to get on the same page.
Great.
Hi, Principal Jackson King from Lawrence E. Boone in DC, PS. I am extremely proud of the engagement that we're having with our parents. Didn't think it would be as high as it is, because sometimes numbers and things like that don't work. But they've been very creative with IG and Facebook and Twitter. So I'm happy about that engagement.
Excellent, thank you.
This is Abe Klayman. I'm at KIPP DC Arts and Technology. We've had some teacher takeovers on our Instagram about once a week, where a teacher will just go through their day, including what they do with students and also what they do in their personal life. They've featured their pets and their kids, and I think it's a really nice way for students to feel connected to the teachers even when they can't see them.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to talk about too, I mean, this is, just from my own kids and my older kid is in pre-K 3, like what she wants and what I've heard from so many of the kids is they just want to see their teachers' faces, even if they're not doing much. And so I want to really, focus on that part of the social connection, because I think that's what we need as adults right now. It's also what our students need, is just to feel connected to someone. So obviously we want our students to continue their learning, but whatever we can do and as flexible as we can be to just make sure folks are just seeing faces from their school, the faces they're used to seeing every day. A couple more folks who are on, who want to share. So I'm going to turn it over to Gracie in a minute, and I'm going to share my screen and just walk through a couple things. We'll go back to some of this in a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about this kind of self-care and leadership work more broadly, and give people a sense kind of what we do on this regularly, and how that all is going to look similar and different, I think, as we go through this crisis. Can everybody see the screen? Any thumbs up? Okay, awesome. So we're going to start with just talking about this self-care piece. So let me go back here. So I'm going to introduce Gracie Obahovich in a minute. And Gracie is a facilitator that works with us at the schools that we're working with full-time. We're doing a pilot. This picture you can see is from Powell Elementary School, of working on the social emotional staff, which is working with schools to transform adult culture so that our adult culture mirrors the work that we want to do with students. It's starting with a kind of a foundation of building relational trust, identifying kind of core elements of self-care, making sure that our teachers and our staff not only taking care of themselves, but each other, building a real community in the adult culture, and building on that work to reflect what lessons we're trying to teach to our young people. So we start with self-care, relational trust, and we move into how we kind of build a culture of shared leadership. And so I'm going to start with Gracie, just kind of filling everybody in a little bit on some basic ideas of where we can focus our attention on our own self-care during this crisis. So I'll turn it over to Gracie.
Thank you so much, Scott. And thank you to all of you for being here and for the work that you do and the ways that you are nimbly adapting to the work you need to be doing to move forward. I want to give a little background on me and how I have come to help people in their self-care, and then pivot to you all and how self-care might help you and help other people with their well-being during this big moment that we're in collectively. And also just the context of my own life right now is that I have a 2.5-year-old downstairs and a 1-month-old in the other room. So we're just going to see how this goes. This is my first professional thing I've done since then, which I'm sure you all can relate to in some sense of working from home. So I've always wanted to help people with self-care, and I always say my biggest teacher for wanting to know more about self-care was growing up in a family that didn't practice a lot of self-care, and then realizing as I got older that not having those skills put me at a deficit in terms of my relationships, my professional life, my self-esteem. And then I started to see this converse relationship, that the more I focused on my self-care, the better my relationships got, the more professional risks I was willing to take, including stepping into more leadership roles, and also the better I felt about myself. And there was a period of my life about 5 years ago where I just felt like I really had to double down on like how I woke up in the morning, what I ate, how I exercised. And I felt this such a strong pull, and I didn't know why. And then about 5 months later, I found out my dad had cancer, and I supported him through the next year and finally his passing. And so from that, I really got two things. One was that self-care is not selfish, that it was really what helped me to show up and be full for my family during a really challenging time. And the second was that we don't know why we practice, and we don't know why we feel pulled to doing something for ourselves. But I think as we live our lives forward, we can see why we need skills, and some part of us is trying to get those skills so we can adapt when life asks us to do that. And we're in that moment right now, I think, where life is asking us to really adapt in a big way. And so I'd love to have more time as a group and just hear like what your self-care practices have been like. So I'm curious the ways that you've been kind of preparing for this before we even knew what was happening. And I'd like to give some tips, I think, to move forward in this. I only have a little bit of time here, so I'm not going to go super in depth, but I know Scott will follow up on some of these ideas as you talk about the bigger picture of what you're doing. So the first is around emotional intelligence and listening to your feelings. When I first started doing self-care, I thought it was just about like green juices and like classes at the gym. And it's not about that. Like doing things to make our body feel physically good is really important. But once I started to take better care of my body physically, I realized that I had all of these feelings and emotions that I didn't know. First, I just thought they were kind of bad things. That if I ever got angry or got sad about something, it was something that I should just make it go away. And a big layer of my self-care has been learning how to listen to myself and understand what it is that I'm feeling, and realize that those feelings and emotions have intelligence to them. So I wrote here, listen to your feelings, but don't believe all of them. And there's a saying I really like called feelings aren't facts, meaning that the first hit we get of something, of that person wronged me, or I'm such a, why did I mess that up? That's not necessarily the truth of what your feeling is. But I would say, listen to what's coming up for you. For me, anger always has a strong pull towards boundaries and understanding when boundaries have been crossed or when I need to set a better boundary. And sadness is really a lot about compassion and just letting myself realize the bigger picture of how people are suffering or how I'm suffering in a moment. And happiness and joy, those are meant to be felt too. They can kind of feel hard to let in sometimes as well. And in terms of leadership, what I think it's really important to listen to your feelings is this concept that I've come to really appreciate called self as instrument. And it's something that I've gotten from a teacher of mine, Diane Hamilton, who is a great facilitator and leader. And self as instrument means that when you are in a group of people and you're taking on a leadership role, that when you're feeling something, it's not necessarily just what you're feeling, but it could be what the group is feeling too. So I'm sure you all have experienced this in the classroom before, that you're feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. And if you were to check in with your students, like there is frustration and there's overwhelm there as well. And so it's honoring that whatever's coming up for you when you're in that kind of capacity, that it probably has resonance in the group. And the more you take care of yourself in that moment, but be it asking for a break, taking some time to kind of check in with yourself or with everybody there, that is a way that you don't inconvenience a group in that way, but really you're serving the group by tending to your own self-care. And so much of where I think there's a lot of information out there that's kind of more like pampering self-care or maybe self-indulgence. And when I talk about real self-care, I mean it's that point where when we're taking care of ourselves, it is serving the people that we're closest to. And when people are looking at role models, I don't think we're looking at people who just have good policies around things, but we're looking for people who are really willing to practice those things and show up in a way to make courageous decisions, which I think a lot of times is listening to your feelings and being willing to take some action on them. But again, not believing all of them, but really taking some time to be mindful, sit with them, try to understand yourself. Does that make sense, that first one? Get a couple of head nods in there. So it's a little hard online sometimes. It's hard for me to read the group. The second one is to always remember the context of what's happening. And I talk about this a lot with people just in the smaller sense of living a daily life, that if you are a new mother, if you have a sick relative, if you are going through a big professional development process, you're probably not going to feel as confident in your life as normal. You're not going to have as much energy for your relationships. If you've just gone through a big breakup, you're probably not going to be as energetic in front of your students or your staff. So it's remembering the context of what you're going through in your life and realizing that your self-care is going to have to adapt and change alongside that. This takes on a bigger context within what we're currently going through, that nobody really knows what's happening right now. Everybody's disoriented. There's a lot of collective overwhelm and a lot of anxiety that can come up around that. And so when we're practicing self-care, especially if you have a lot of people who are dependent upon you right now, or your staff is not totally grasping the what you want to be putting out there in terms of distance learning, and remembering the context that we're all dealing with a lot of feelings. We all have different levels of emotional intelligence around that, and that we're going to do the best we can in any moment. And a big layer of what self-care is for me is looking at perfectionism, which is the idea that if we could just do things better, that we wouldn't have to feel difficult feelings or go through hard times in our life. And so remembering the context helps us to really work through that, to say, like, this is a hard time. I can take good care of myself. I can pause when I need to pause. I can kind of like deal with complexity and not make that mean that I'm a bad leader or not a great parent or whatever label or story we're putting on ourselves. How's that one? That kind of land? All right. Thank you for the head nods. I appreciate it. And then the third one is really, it's make and celebrate small strategic moves. And when I talk about perfectionism, I see it as something that's not just a personal issue that we deal with, but really like the bigger way that we work as a society and culture, especially in the United States. And so many of us approach self-care from a very perfectionistic sense. We want to do it all perfectly. If we mess it up, we kind of are like, I'm not good at self-care. Being a self-care coach, I talk to people a lot who say they're not good at self-care. And that's always a great sign for me that perfectionism is at work there. And what I've come to see is the antidote to perfectionism, which tells us either A, that we have to work really hard and push ourselves for us to have anything happen in our lives, or B, which is a little bit more subtle, is around procrastination. I really see procrastinators as perfectionists too, that procrastinators tell themselves the story that when the time is perfect, I will do that. And because the perfect time never comes, they never have to do it. And the way to work through both of those is a philosophy. It's called Kaizen. Has anyone heard of Kaizen before? It's a Japanese word, and it means small change, continuous change, or good change. And it's been classically used in a business context, that instead of looking to make really big changes for greater productivity, instead you look for the smallest, easiest change to make. And then once that has been fully incorporated, you add another small change in there. And companies like Toyota have been built upon the idea of Kaizen. And so when perfectionism tells us that we have to have a really big victory and kind of reach perfection in order for us to celebrate ourselves, what a philosophy like Kaizen will say is that we need to set really small goals, take time to celebrate them, and then set smaller goals. For people who are very kind of attached to their perfectionist view, and I definitely am one of those, I want like my biggest loser moment all the time. I think a philosophy like Kaizen can feel not very exciting, but I've seen it in my own life, and I've seen it in so many of my clients, that when we focus on small things that we can do to take care of ourselves, to take care of our staff, to realize that we are learning something, it's how we make really, really meaningful change that is actually sustainable. And so some examples of this in self-care are not to try to go to bed 2 hours earlier if you're used to going to bed at like 1 a.m., not to try to go to bed at 11, but see if you can shoot for like 12:30, which might not seem like that big of a deal, but if you can get 12:30 down, then you can move to 12:15, and then you can move to midnight, and then eventually you can move your bedtime to something that would give you a greater feeling of being rested in the morning. Not trying to go out and run 3 miles if you haven't put on running shoes in a while, but rather taking a 15-minute walk and then being excited that you did that and showing up the next day and maybe doing 16 minutes. And in what you're on one level, what you're doing is you're actually building habits, and that's important. But I think more important than that is you're building self-esteem, or you're building a story about yourself that you can do something and that you can make changes, and that the way it has been doesn't have to be the way it is moving forward. And I found a lot in these past few weeks of life that my own ability to like make small things happen on my day-to-day basis just gives me a nice feeling of grounding. And it also gives me a feeling of confidence that no matter what comes after this, that I will be able to make small changes. And I think the more, especially if you identify as someone who is a perfectionist, and that's the way that you lead, or you kind of have some self-awareness around that, your ability to model this and do this for people who are learning from you and looking to you, I think it can be a greatly calming move as well, and help people feel like they can make some mistakes and try small goals and keep moving forward in that way as well. So I'm going to pause there and just see, do we have time for any questions or anything, Scott?
Go ahead, yeah.
All right. I always like the part where you ask questions more than the part where I talk. Does anyone have any comments or questions that you want to add to the conversation in this?
And we are going to have time for questions too, for people to just kind of submit them, and we'll come back to folks. But if one or two people wanted to share things now, feel free to use the raise hand button, or you can just call something out. All right. So we'll keep going. Thank you, Gracie. As a little slice of the wisdom of Gracie and the work that we're doing with schools to ensure this kind of teacher self-care on a regular basis, and an educator, right? Everyone who's working in our schools. And I wanted to just touch on that Kaizen philosophy a little bit, because I think it's just really important right now. And everybody here is ambitious and has some big goals we were trying to achieve this year, and all of a sudden things got kind of cut off, right? We went into this period where we don't know what we're going to be able to accomplish. We don't know if this big dream that we had for what we were going to do at our school this year is going to happen with our work. And so I've been feeling that a lot personally, that like we had these big goals for the year, we were going to try to accomplish these things, and we just got to the point in the year where we were going to really ask for them, right? And really start to make progress. We want a lot more money for special education. We want a lot more for our English language learners. And, we were really going to start to make these asks. And now people are like, can we even maintain our budgets for next year? Do we even have enough money to do what we're doing right now? So kind of that feeling of falling short, am I going to reach my goals? Am I not? I think it's a really important time to think about what those little steps are that are going to make us feel satisfied that we're still on the path to doing what we're determined to do. So I think that's really important right now to be able to, someone told me the other day, kind of like thinking in 2 or 3 week windows right now is really helpful, because we just don't know what is going to happen in 2 months or 3 months. But if we can set ourselves goals for the next couple weeks, for the next 3 weeks, and have something to work towards and get up and work on, that's really important. So thanks, Gracie.
I just wanted to say too that if I'm not like fully back on email and maternity world right now, but if anyone does just have any questions or things you want to contribute, you can write me. I put my website in the chat, and you can just write me from there. And I'd love to like just hear how I can support you all too. And again, really appreciate the work you all are doing right now.
Thank you, Gracie. I want to hear from Claire quickly, who's a teacher at Banneker High School, just to get a little bit of the kind of what is the daily life like for our educators right now. Claire has 3 kids and there's a lot to juggle. So I just want to hear from her a little bit, just to give us the perspective of what we're doing managing all these things at the same time.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I have 3 kids. They are 3, 3, and 5. And so my husband and I are both teachers in DCPS. So we are home with them and trying to teach virtually, as well as manage all of them. My son's school has done some virtual learning, and then they're going to start a kind of more intense virtual learning on Monday. So that will kind of add some additional challenges to our life. But basically, just still getting up early around 5 o'clock like normal, trying to get a few things done before the kids wake up, maybe trying to get a little bit of exercise in. Then, you know, rolling with the kids, and my husband and I just alternating, kind of tagging in and out when we have different phone calls and things that we know we need to get done. And then just trying to check in with as many students as possible, trying to keep the English department as content as possible, trying to troubleshoot you know, technology issues, and just be a good like communications person for the, sorry, my neighbor just started the lawnmower. Anyway, that's kind of what it's like.
Thanks, Claire. We reach out to a lot of teachers to share their perspectives, just so I can share them with you and with the broader community. So I just wanted to go through some things that folks said back to us. So this is kind of, we first asked them kind of what they need from their school leaders, and then we also asked them what they're really proud of that they're doing right now. So the first was reach out to me, provide some connection. I think this is what we talked about already. People just want that emotional connection. Praise me for what I'm doing and not made to feel like I'm not doing enough, and clear expectations. I think the expectations are really important. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but the kind of asking what they need to do and not necessarily dictating the how and the why and the when, and right when everyone's going through something very different. Specials teachers, not forgetting about us and planning with us too. I think obviously a lot of those folks are going above and beyond, but it is hard right now. I think people just want to continue the academics, but remembering that our inner core, as is called in DCPS, or the specials, they are part of our children's learning, and the children really need that right now, especially being in close quarters. Then we have, often it's the school support service staff and counselors who are doing major lifting during these times, asking for patience and bringing extra help to it. I think also remembering that all educators are providing some kind of social service and counseling to some extent right now to a lot of their teachers, and making sure their educators are equipped with the skills that they need, the resources they need to talk students through things that they're going to be hearing when they might just be in the course of trying to do academic distance learning. And then technology, right? Not everybody's technology proficient. Some people feel really overwhelmed with it. And I really like this, use this transition to build trust with us instead of adding stress. Just thinking about, there might be that typically you add one new thing, take one thing away. I think in this time, it might be even taking more than one thing away when we're adding something new, because everybody has a lot of things going on at home, right? beyond what they're doing for work. And then what they're doing right now to feel proud of: keeping students and families engaged with physical activities, socially, emotionally, building a sense of community, singing the school song and telling them how proud of them they are. I thought that was nice. And then using a system to connect with students every morning, every afternoon. My wife, who's a teacher, had a WhatsApp group that just like the students are texting like crazy to each other. They just really want to be connected to each other. So whatever we can do to give them that outlet right now. And then finding innovative ways to keep students connected through virtual student government and club meetings. I thought this was really cool, not just continuing their academics, but find ways to continue the things that a lot of these kids show up for, right? The extracurriculars and things that they really love their schools because of. So I just wanted to talk through a few concrete ideas here about what we can do on educator self-care and empowerment. So Maslow's hierarchy, right? I think it's really important for all of us to keep in mind right now. There's a lot of people in some ways, right? As educators, we're really lucky with people with full-time education jobs because we have a full-time paycheck, as educators that you can depend on. And there's a lot of people losing their jobs right now. There's a lot of people without food security. And so I have heard a lot of gratitude from teachers about just feeling like they're really lucky to have a job that's fulfilling, that they get to keep doing, that they get to keep getting paid for. And so I think gratitude is important, right? Not just how difficult it is, but I think people are feeling a lot of gratitude about their jobs as well. But also recognizing that there are a lot of folks who are educators who also are struggling with food security, who are struggling with being able to pay bills. And then that, starting with that physiological, moving into that safety, self-actualization right now seems so hard. And I think that's where that Kaizen comes into effect. And I think for me, where it's really been is like that esteem level, like, am I doing something? Do I feel productive? Do I feel like I'm accomplishing something with my time? So I think that's really important. And just thinking about that everyone's lives are so different right now, and demonstrating trust in your teachers. And so I think what's really important is giving them the flexibility in terms of, this is what we need you to accomplish, but the when and the how are really, you're going to have some flexibility with, because we know your lives are really different. And so one of the ways I think we can do that is just having regular check-ins. This is when we asked teachers what they wanted from principals. They said, just check in with me, see how I'm doing, and let me kind of tell you what I'm doing with students, right? And I think they kind of want, instead of the check-ins that are like, did you do this? Did you do this? Like, hey, how's it going? How are you personally? And then just the question, right, of like what they're doing, so they have a chance to present to you what they feel really proud of that they're doing to continue learning with their students. The sharing best practices, again, I think making sure this doesn't happen entirely by, full staff Zoom meetings, right? Where folks, like they often will in PDs, feel like maybe this doesn't apply to me. Do I need to be on here right now? I've got kids screaming in the background. Is this a good use of my time? But I think teachers do want to hear what each other are doing, right, in their school. So finding ways in ways that don't require everybody to be in the same place at the same time, to share with your staff what other people on staff are doing for students in creative ways, and across schools. And we hope we can build a community across schools to show off what folks are doing in their schools. And we're going to start a website up this week where folks who are kind of going above and beyond for their students in a whole lot of ways can post what they're doing. And if they need extra funds to do that, if they just want a shout out and appreciation for what they're doing, or just to share it with other people who might do the same thing. So we'll share that with all of you when that's up. Any thoughts or questions so far before I keep going? So, and then appreciations, right? Super important right now. A lot of you have big staffs and this isn't possible to do with everyone, but if folks folks are pretty excited to get something in the mail right now. If anybody has an opportunity to do that, little care packages, sending, a bar of chocolate or whatever that is to a staff member, or right, sending them some gift card for food takeout or delivery or something, right? Little ways to show appreciation. But I think also just the public shout outs, right, are really important, because they get that in person, and they don't necessarily get that when they're when they're kind of doing everything virtually. And I know some schools are already finding really creative ways to kind of do virtual shout outs pretty regularly. But I think that's really important, showing the appreciation. And we're not going to be in school for Teacher Appreciation Week, likely, right? I mean, I think, so I think finding ways to make sure that continues. It's a hard slog and time of the year in the spring when school goes on for a long time, sometimes without a break. And spring break wasn't a real thing this year. So folks haven't had much of a break. And that week in DCPS was really prepping for distance learning, right? And folks in charters have had different timing. So figuring out how you're going to do teacher appreciation in this difficult environment is a good thing to just kind of have on the radar. And the last thing I want to mention is asset mapping and regular check-ins and preparing teachers kind of for the career that they want at your school. I think this is an opportunity that we have now. There are folks who have not a second in their day right now because they're managing their jobs and a whole lot of other things at home. And there are folks who have a lot of time at home right now. And one of the things and I think everybody wants to feel some progress. So I think one thing that could be really good during this time is checking in with teachers about their professional goals in a longer term. And just having a conversation about how do they see themselves at this school going forward, right? Kind of over the longer term, because for teachers who want to move into leadership in some way, and for most teachers, that doesn't mean leaving the classroom, but they might want to take on a leadership role of some kind at the school. This is a really good opportunity for folks to do webinars, to do online courses, to work with you on an idea that they have for how to improve your school. When you check in with folks, this is, I think, a great opportunity to talk to them about what ways they can have an eye towards their future at their school by developing some skills that might help the broader school, and have a conversation with them about what that would look like for them to do it next year. So I think that's a really important way that folks can feel like they're moving forward. And I think even though there's a lot of gratitude about having these jobs and this paycheck right now, I do think retention is still going to be a struggle in some ways, because the reality is some teachers are at home dealing with a lot of stress and a job on top of it, and the kind of absorbing the secondary trauma of what their students are going through. And there's just going to be a lot of emotions in this time. And I think there's going to be a lot of people in every field thinking about, is this what I want to do? And do I want to continue doing what I'm doing right now, or do I need a change? And so those regular check-ins, asking people about their career goals, asking what they need from you, where they see themselves, I think is a really good time for that, to keep your folks on board for the long term. Anyone want to share anything related to those tips that I just went through?
Just real quick, we have a staff-wide group chat. We use Crew, but it's like basically a WhatsApp. And that's become a real positive place. I mean, I think it was beforehand, but I think it's really just a lot of screenshots of video calls with kids, like happy birthdays, and a lot of just like positive things I think are allowing people to stay connected, but like you mentioned, not necessarily all at the same time. And so it's been, if that's something that people do have, I think that's great. If they don't, I think it was new to me, but it's been really nice.
Mention what it's called again.
The app is Crew, but I don't know if there's anything about it that's particularly different than WhatsApp. It might just be easier to add names to it, but it's basically a chat app like a GroupMe or something like that.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I think that's, I don't know about all of you. I'm constantly just like looking at my phone right now, like text messages from friends and family, just like wanting that connection to someone outside of the walls of the house. So I think anything that like has a feature where people are just kind of talking with each other, whether that's sharing pictures, sharing videos, using Instagram, using WhatsApp, whatever it is really good. Just give people the sense of connection and community right now. And I was going to share one of the things we do in our workshops is we ask people, we do this formal, informal process, which is, what does your school do formally right now that it could do or should do informally? And what does your school do informally that it really should have a process for? And it's a really good activity to kind of bring out of people kind of, things that drive their stress or things that they want to change. And I think this is a good time to think in that mindset as well, right? Because we're seeing how we can take things virtually. And this might be a good way to think about some long-term changes, not just moving things online because people need that in-person connection, but what are the things that you need a process for, and what are the things you're discovering now maybe you don't need a formalized process for? Just going through that thought process in thinking and in asking teachers and staff for feedback on that. I think we all have some time now. Hopefully, I know principals and educators are all super busy in this time, but some time to just do some reflection on what it is we want to come back to when we're all back to school and back in community together. Any other principals on the line want to share reflections on what we've talked about so far, or something else they're doing at their school that haven't had a chance to do that?
Well, I just wanted to share that, a lot of what you're talking about actually is kind of effective. Just really focusing on the positive, just really, you know, looking at this as an opportunity to kind of have some professional development in something that they didn't sign up for. They kind of signed up to be in or at the campus and not kind of a virtual kind of educator. So I think a lot of that has really resonated well with the staff. And the teachers are enjoying it. The students are enjoying it. It's just it's a good environment thus far.
Good. Glad to hear that. And that's Principal Harbor of Friendship at Public Charter School, by the way, for folks who didn't know. Anyone else want to jump in? All right. So I want to do a couple other things. First, I want to just share with folks what we do to continue this work in the long term. So this is the work we do. I previewed it a little bit earlier when Gracie was on. This is the work we do with Gracie, and kind of combining self-care and distributive leadership work. So we start, Gracie leads this first part, which is on 3 different levels of self-care: effective communication, boundaries, and then creative constructive conflict and relational trust. There's a lot of research that relational trust is really the foundation of successful schools, and that kind of schools who not only achieve success, but really sustain success over a period of time, it's because they really have both staff stability and trust. And so this is where we try to start building that relational trust in your staff. And then the second part of our workshops are about professional voice, distributive leadership. So asset mapping: where's all the expertise in the building? Who is everyone who is an expert in something being taken advantage of? Do they feel like their expertise is being taken advantage of and used? Do we have a culture of voice, a culture where people feel free to speak and feel free to put forward their ideas, right? And then professional authority and autonomy. Do we have the right levels, right? People who are in early years really want a lot of support often, and people who are in later, more experienced years teaching want more autonomy. Do we have the right balance of that for different folks? And do we differentiate support and autonomy? A big thing we hear from teachers, perhaps more than anything else, is differentiated PD, right? They want their PD to be personalized, differentiated, to fit what their specific needs are. And our teacher retention action group, a group of teachers from across DCPS and charter schools, have been promoting an idea called floating professional development, which is that folks get an allotment of hours essentially for the year. And that could be 12, 16, and they use them essentially the same day they would use sick hours. They would put in a request to use them. And what those are used for is to go observe a teacher, either at their school or at a different school, and bring back a lesson from an expert teacher. And this is really a way both for them to personalize their learning objectives and professional development, and also to build organic mentor relationships. Often when we try to build mentor relationships, there's some research that a lot of formal mentorship programs fail. And part of the reason for that is people feel like they've been coupled, they've just been set up on a blind date and it doesn't work out. It's not the right partnership. But if we allow teachers to observe and learn from teacher experts that they respect, bring back those lessons, and then demonstrate to their school leaders how they're incorporating that work and improving their practice, they can form natural mentor relationships and improve in their own professional development goals. So that's a thing we're working with schools on. And then the last thing is mapping distributive leadership at the school. Do you have a plan for shared leadership, how folks advance in their own roles, establishing some teacher leaders who are going to take on different roles, whether that's release time from teaching, or it's something they do in addition and they're getting compensated in a different way. But for teachers to have different kinds of roles they can take on without leaving the classroom. So those are some of the things. This is the full year of work that we do with schools, and I'm happy to talk to any of you who are interested in doing this with us next year. We only take on 2 schools at a time doing this because it's intensive. We do a once a month workshop with the school, and then there's ongoing support between that for a group of about 15 staff people. So the once a month workshop is with this small group. We do a couple full staff workshops throughout the year, and then a lot of ongoing support to develop teacher leaders at the school. And then a smaller version of that, which we've done with a broader cohort of schools is, and we're recruiting for next year, a once a month cohort of 8 to 10 schools, which is a small team. So it's the principal and 3 to 5 of your staff members. So 100% of those who participated this year said it was really valuable use of their time. And what we're doing is, you can see it there, building trust, staff communication, teacher time, shared leadership work. So something similar, but we're essentially, it's a learning cohort, as if we're in a course together, where we learn these concepts, you bring them back to your school and you implement them at your own school. This is a really low cost for folks to get involved. We meet once a month as a group. You bring those lessons back to your school, and then we share ideas between schools to see how everyone is applying them. That includes us doing survey and data work around shared leadership with the school, providing shared leadership resources, including like a guide for how to implement teacher-led professional development. So we have a few schools signed up for that already for next year, but we have space for up to 6 more schools to join. So I wanted to throw open that opportunity as well, and let us know if that's something you're interested in, to continue this kind of self-care and empowerment work in a longer term. And I'm going to stop talking and ask if anyone has any questions or anything else they want to share for the benefit of the group. Is Rhonda on the phone? It's someone who's about to jump on. Okay. So before we get off, I'm going to get out of the screen share for a minute. Before we get off today, I just wanted to have folks drop a couple things into the chat here. So if everyone can just drop a takeaway into the chat, something that you want to implement as a result of our conversation today, something you might take back to your school, something you want to try to do with your teachers, and then I'll share a couple before we wrap up. So I'll give folks 2 minutes to drop something into the chat. Give folks another minute in case folks are typing. If you have any more ideas about what you want to take away or implement, let us know. Thanks for all of these ideas. I think I want to go back to end on that small wins, right? We all need to feel like we're accomplishing something. We're moving forward right now. We're being productive with our work. And let's do that with our teachers and with ourselves, all right? To make sure that kind of we feel productive, we feel mentally well. We're moving towards self-actualization, even if we're not there in this moment, and there's a lot on our minds. But setting those small goals, establishing those habits and small wins, and then also just really thinking about what those changes are we want to make and how we want to come out of this better and be able to serve our students, serve our teachers and our school communities better. So I really appreciate all of you for participating in this. And there's a lot of folks who couldn't jump on, who want to who we're gonna share this video with, and we do hope, like I said, to put up a page where we can show a lot of folks, and I invite principals to do that as well. Just show us what you're doing in your school so we can share those practices. People are being really creative right now about how they serve our students. So we want to continue to share all that and build a community amongst you. So thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day and weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.